The notification chimed on Daniel's phone just as he was pulling into the driveway after a long day at the accounting firm. He glanced at the screen, expecting maybe a reminder about picking up milk or a question about dinner plans. Instead, the words that greeted him made his blood run cold. "I'm out. Meet me at the usual spot. Quick, my husband's home." Daniel sat frozen in his car, the engine still running, reading and rereading those 14 words that seemed to dismantle his entire world. His wife. His Rebecca. The woman he'd been married to for 8 years. The woman who'd cried in his arms just last month about how much she loved their life together. The screen blurred slightly as his hands began to tremble. For several minutes, he simply stared at the message, his mind racing through 1,000 memories, searching for signs he'd missed. The late nights she'd explained away with book club meetings. The new perfume she'd started wearing. The way she'd been glancing at her phone more frequently, always angling it away from his view. It all crashed over him like a wave of ice water. The initial shock gave way to something else, a strange, analytical calm that surprised him. Maybe it was his nature as an accountant, trained to look at problems methodically, to find solutions in chaos. Or maybe it was just denial, his mind protecting itself from the full emotional impact. Either way, Daniel found himself thinking with unusual clarity. She'd made a mistake. An enormous, revealing mistake. She'd meant to text someone else, her affair partner, presumably, but instead had texted her own husband. The irony would have been laughable if it weren't so devastating. But this mistake also presented him with something unexpected, an opportunity. Daniel's finger hovered over the screen. He could confront her directly, of course. Storm into the house and demand answers. But years of watching courtroom dramas and true crime documentaries had taught him something valuable. Evidence matters. Emotions run hot, and people lie when they're cornered. If he wanted the truth, the whole truth, he needed to be smart about this. A plan began forming in his mind, cold and calculated. He would play along. He would pretend to be whoever she thought she was texting. He would go to this usual spot and see for himself what his wife had been hiding. The thought made his stomach churn, but the anger building in his chest pushed him forward. With deliberate calmness, Daniel typed out a response, "On my way. Give me 20 minutes." He hit send and waited, watching the little delivered notification appear below his message. Then he saw it, the 3 dots indicating she was typing. His heart hammered against his ribs. Perfect. Park behind the old warehouse like always. Can't wait to see you. The old warehouse. Daniel knew exactly where she meant, an abandoned industrial building on the outskirts of town, near the defunct rail yard. They'd driven past it countless times. He'd never given it a second thought. Now it felt sinister, a secret location for secret meetings. Daniel took a screenshot of both messages, his hand steadier now that he had a purpose. Then he did something that surprised even himself. He opened his browser and started researching. Who owned that property? Was it actually abandoned, or was someone living there? The more he dug, the more interesting things became. The warehouse and surrounding property were owned by the Riverside Development Corporation, and according to public records, it was private property with multiple no trespassing signs posted. There had even been a notice in the local paper 3 months ago about increased security and prosecution of trespassers after vandalism incidents. A grim smile crossed Daniel's face. His wife and her lover had been meeting on private property illegally. This changed things. This gave him leverage beyond just catching them in the act. He pulled out his phone again and made a call to his friend James, who worked as a police officer in town. "James, I need a favor," Daniel said, his voice surprisingly steady. "And I need you to trust me on this without asking too many questions right now." 20 minutes until he'd promised to be there. 20 minutes to prepare for the confrontation that would define the rest of his life. Daniel put the car in reverse and backed out of his driveway, leaving his home behind, uncertain if he'd ever feel the same way about it again. Daniel drove to the police station with a strange sense of detachment, as if he were watching himself from outside his own body. The familiar streets of his neighborhood blurred past, each turn bringing him closer to confirming what he desperately hoped wasn't true. James had agreed to meet him immediately, hearing something in Daniel's voice that signaled genuine urgency. Inside the station, James led him to a small conference room, away from the bustling main floor. His friend's expression was serious, concerned. They'd known each other since college, had been best man at each other's weddings. James had toasted Rebecca and Daniel's marriage with genuine joy. Now, Daniel was about to ask him to potentially arrest her. "Talk to me," James said simply, closing the door behind them. Daniel pulled out his phone and showed James the messages. He watched his friend's expression shift from confusion to understanding to sympathy. James let out a long breath and sat down heavily in one of the plastic chairs. "Daniel, I'm so sorry," James began, but Daniel held up his hand. "I need you to help me handle this the right way," Daniel interrupted. "Not as my friend right now, but as a cop. She said to meet at the old warehouse by the rail yard. That's private property, isn't it? Posted with no trespassing signs." James's eyes narrowed slightly, and Daniel could see him shifting into professional mode. "It is. Riverside Development has been aggressive about prosecuting trespassers this year after some vandalism issues. They've got security cameras up now too. Are you telling me she's been meeting someone there regularly?" "The usual spot," she called it. "Park behind the warehouse like always." Those were her exact words. Daniel's voice remained steady, but James could see his friend's knuckles turning white as he gripped the edge of the table. James pulled out a notepad, and for a moment, neither spoke. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and somewhere down the hall, a phone rang insistently. Finally, James looked up. "Here's what I can do legally," he said. "If you have reason to believe someone is actively trespassing on posted private property, I can accompany you to investigate. If we find trespassers, I can intervene. But Daniel, you need to think about what you're doing here. Once this starts, there's no taking it back." "It's already started," Daniel replied quietly. "She started it when she began sneaking around. When she started lying to me. When she made me feel crazy for noticing things were different. I just want to know the truth." James nodded slowly. "Okay. But we do this by the book. No confrontations, no violence. You let me handle any interactions once we're there. Understood?" "Understood." They spent the next 10 minutes going over the plan. James would follow Daniel in an unmarked car, staying far enough back to not be noticed but close enough to respond quickly. Once they arrived, James would remain out of sight until Daniel confirmed his wife's presence. Then, depending on the situation, James would intervene appropriately. "One more thing," James added, pulling up something on his computer. "I checked the incident reports for that location. There have been 3 complaints in the past 6 months from Riverside Development about the same blue sedan being seen on the property after hours. They even got a partial plate number from their security footage." He turned the screen toward Daniel. "Does your wife drive a blue Honda Accord, license plate ending in 7243? Daniel's stomach dropped. "Yes." "Then she's already on their radar. Security company's been building a case. If we catch her there tonight, it won't be her first offense in their eyes." James's expression was sympathetic but professional. "This could get serious, Daniel. Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Daniel thought about all the evenings Rebecca had come home late, smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't his. The credit card statements with unexplained charges at a motel across town that she'd brushed off as errors she'd meant to dispute. The way she'd started sleeping turned away from him, where she used to curl into his arms. The emotional distance that had grown between them like a chasm he couldn't bridge no matter how hard he tried. "I'm sure," he said firmly. "She thinks she's meeting her lover for a romantic rendezvous. Instead, she's going to find out that actions have consequences. That you can't just betray someone who loves you and expect to walk away clean." James studied his friend's face for a long moment, then nodded. "All right. Let's go." As they prepared to leave, James placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Whatever happens out there, whatever we find, you're going to get through this. You hear me?" Daniel managed a slight nod, though he wasn't sure he believed it. His entire life felt like it was balanced on the edge of a knife, about to tip one way or the other irrevocably. He checked his watch. He'd told Rebecca he'd be there in 20 minutes, and 15 had already passed. They walked out to their vehicles, the evening air cool against Daniel's face. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that seemed too beautiful for such an ugly moment. As he climbed into his car, Daniel caught his reflection in the window, a man who'd left for work that morning happily married and would return home that night. As what? He didn't know yet. He started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, watching in his rearview mirror as James's unmarked sedan fell into position several car lengths behind. The drive to the warehouse would take about 12 minutes. 12 minutes to prepare himself for whatever he was about to discover. 12 minutes before his marriage either ended or transformed into something unrecognizable. Daniel's phone buzzed. Another message from Rebecca. "Where are you? I'm waiting." His hands tightened on the steering wheel, and he pressed down harder on the accelerator. The old warehouse loomed against the darkening sky like a monument to decay. Daniel had driven past this place hundreds of times without really seeing it, just another piece of urban blight waiting for redevelopment. Now, as he pulled off the main road onto the cracked asphalt lot, every detail seemed to burn itself into his memory with painful clarity. Chain-link fencing surrounded most of the property, but there were obvious gaps where the mesh had been cut or pulled aside. Large red and white signs proclaimed no trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted at regular intervals, their warning unmistakable even in the fading light. Security cameras, relatively new from the look of them, were mounted at strategic points on the building's exterior. Daniel followed the gravel path around to the back of the warehouse as Rebecca had instructed, his headlights sweeping across broken concrete and wild vegetation reclaiming the space. His heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his throat, in his fingertips, behind his eyes. This was real. This was actually happening. Behind the building, partially hidden by an overgrown loading dock, sat Rebecca's blue Accord. The sight of it hit him like a physical blow. Part of him had still hoped, irrationally, that this was all some terrible misunderstanding. But there was her car, exactly where she'd told her lover to park, exactly where she'd apparently parked many times before. Daniel pulled his SUV in a few spaces away and killed the engine. For a moment, he just sat there, breathing carefully, trying to maintain the analytical calm that had carried him this far. Through his rearview mirror, he could see James's unmarked sedan positioning itself near the entrance to the rear lot, lights off, nearly invisible in the gathering dusk. His phone buzzed. "I see you. I'm inside, second floor, northwest corner. The room with the blue top over the window. Hurry." The casualness of it, the practiced familiarity, made Daniel's jaw clench. How many times had they exchanged messages like this? How many times had Rebecca lied to his face and then rushed to this place, to another man's arms? He forced himself to respond, "Coming now." Daniel stepped out of his car, and the evening air felt different here, stale, abandoned, tinged with rust and rot. He dressed in dark clothes before leaving the station, at James's suggestion. Now he was grateful for that advice as he moved toward the warehouse entrance, keeping to the shadows. The metal door hung partially open, scraped marks on the ground suggesting frequent use. Inside, the warehouse was a maze of darkness punctuated by shafts of dying daylight filtering through broken windows and gaps in the roof. Industrial debris littered the floor, old pallets, twisted metal, shattered glass that crunched softly under his feet. A staircase rose against the far wall, its metal steps rusted but still solid. Daniel began to climb, each footfall echoing in the empty space. His mind raced with scenarios. What would he find in that northwest corner room? Rebecca alone, waiting? Rebecca with someone else? What would he say? What would he do? At the second-floor landing, Daniel paused. A narrow corridor stretched before him, doors gaping open on either side like dark mouths. Graffiti covered the walls, and the smell of mold was thick and cloying. He could see a blue top covering a window at the far end, the room Rebecca had described. His phone buzzed again. "Where are you? Did you get lost?" The impatience in the message sparked his anger anew. He texted back, "Almost there. Just being careful." Daniel moved down the corridor, his shoes quiet on the concrete floor. As he approached the room, he could see light from a phone screen casting a faint glow against the walls. Someone was in there. His wife. Waiting for a man who wasn't her husband. He stopped just outside the doorway, pressed against the wall, listening. He could hear her breathing, hear the rustle of fabric as she moved. Then, her voice, soft and intimate in the darkness. "Finally. I was starting to think you'd chickened out." It was the tone more than the words that cut him, the warmth in her voice, the affection. A tone she used to use with him but hadn't in months. Daniel felt something crack inside his chest, but he kept his face neutral, his breathing steady. He had a role to play. "Not a chance," he said, pitching his voice slightly lower, keeping to the shadows. "Just had to make sure we weren't followed." Rebecca laughed, a sound that was once music to his ears. "Always so paranoid. Come here. I've missed you." Daniel stepped into the doorway, still keeping his face in shadow. The room was mostly empty except for some old tarps and what looked like an improvised sitting area, blankets, pillows, even some candles. This wasn't just a quick meeting spot. This was a place they'd made comfortable, a place they'd spent time in. The betrayal of it, the premeditation, the care they'd taken, it made everything worse. "Actually," Daniel said, his voice returning to normal, "I think we need to talk, Rebecca." He stepped into the light cast by her phone screen. The transformation on Rebecca's face would have been comical in any other circumstance. Confusion shifted to recognition, recognition to shock, shock to naked fear. Her mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish pulled from water. The phone slipped from her hands and clattered on the concrete. "Daniel." Her voice was barely a whisper. "What are you? How did you?" "You texted me instead of him," Daniel said, surprised by how steady his voice remained. "You sent I'm out. Meet me at the usual spot. Quick, my husband's home to your husband." Did you even realize your mistake? Or were you so excited about your secret rendezvous that you didn't bother to check? Rebecca's face drained of color. She took a step backward, her hand reaching out to steady herself against the wall. "Daniel, I can explain. It's not what you think." "Not what I think." Daniel's calm began to fracture. "You're standing in an abandoned warehouse, in a room you've clearly set up for romantic meetings, waiting for another man. What part am I misunderstanding, Rebecca?" "Please, just let me," she started, but Daniel held up his phone, showing her the screenshots. "Park behind the warehouse like always," he read aloud. "Like always. How long, Rebecca? How many times have you come here? How many times have you lied to my face and then rushed off to meet him?" Tears began streaming down Rebecca's face, but Daniel found he felt nothing at the sight. The woman crying before him seemed like a stranger, someone wearing his wife's face but containing none of the person he thought he knew. "6 months," she whispered. "It's been 6 months. Daniel, I never meant to hurt you. I never meant for any of this to happen. It just what? Just happened." Daniel's voice rose despite his efforts to control it. "You accidentally fell into an affair. You accidentally set up a secret meeting place. You accidentally lied to me every single day for half a year." Rebecca sobbed, covering her face with her hands. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It was a mistake. All of it was a mistake." "You're right about that," Daniel said coldly. "And it's about to get worse." Outside, he could hear footsteps on the metal stairs, James, right on cue. Rebecca's head snapped toward the sound, new fear flooding her features. "Who's that?" "Daniel, what did you do?" "What did I do?" Daniel laughed bitterly. "I'm not the one who's been repeatedly trespassing on private property." The footsteps grew louder, and James appeared in the doorway, his police uniform now visible in the dim light, badge reflecting the last rays of sunlight filtering through the topped window. Rebecca's eyes widened in recognition and horror. "Officer Rodriguez." Her voice cracked. "What's going on? Daniel, why is James here?" James's expression was professional, carefully neutral. Are you aware that you're currently trespassing on private property? This building and the surrounding land are owned by Riverside Development Corporation, and there are clearly posted no trespassing signs throughout the perimeter." Rebecca looked between her husband and his friend, her mind clearly struggling to process what was happening. You can't be serious. Daniel, tell him this is a mistake. We're just. Just what? Daniel interrupted. Just having an affair on someone else's property? Just breaking the law repeatedly while betraying your marriage vows? James pulled out a small notebook. Mrs. Patterson, according to security company records, a vehicle matching the description and partial plate of your blue Honda Accord has been documented on this property without authorization on at least 3 separate occasions over the past 6 months. The property owners have expressed their intent to prosecute trespassers to the fullest extent of the law. The color drained from Rebecca's face. This can't be happening. This is insane. Daniel, please. We can talk about this at home. We can work this out. Now you want to talk, Daniel said, his voice hollow. Now that you're caught. Now that there are consequences. Where was this willingness to communicate when you were sneaking around behind my back? Rebecca tried a different approach, turning fully to James. James, please. You've known us for years. You were at our wedding. You know Daniel, and I can work this out without involving the police. This is between husband and wife. James's expression softened slightly, but his voice remained firm. Rebecca, I'm here in an official capacity. The trespassing isn't something I can ignore, especially given that it's been documented multiple times. The property owners have been very clear about their intentions. But you're Daniel's friend. Rebecca's voice rose, edging toward hysteria. You're not really going to arrest me. This is just to scare me, right? To teach me a lesson. Before anyone could respond, another sound echoed through the warehouse. Footsteps, quick and purposeful, coming up the stairs. Rebecca's face transformed again, this time to a different kind of fear mixed with desperate hope. That's him, she whispered. Oh God, that's Andrew. He must have seen the cars. He must have thought. She turned to Daniel, pleading now. Daniel, please, don't let him see this. Don't do this. I'll do anything. We can forget this all happened. I'll end it right now, I swear. End it. Daniel's laugh was bitter. Rebecca, it ended the moment you sent me that text. You just didn't know it yet. A man appeared in the doorway, mid-30s, athletic build, dressed in business casual clothing. He stopped short when he saw the scene before him. Rebecca crying, Daniel standing with crossed arms, and James in full police uniform. What the hell? The man's eyes darted between everyone, settling finally on Rebecca. Becca, what's going on? Who are these people? Andrew, just go, Rebecca said frantically. Please, just leave. This isn't, you need to go. But Andrew's gaze had fixed on Daniel, and recognition dawned on his face. You're the husband. It wasn't a question. I am, Daniel confirmed, studying the man his wife had chosen over him. He looked ordinary, unremarkable. Nothing special. Somehow that made it worse. And you're the man who's been sleeping with my wife in an abandoned warehouse like a couple of teenagers. Andrew's face flushed red. Look, man, I don't want any trouble. Rebecca said you two were basically done, that you were just going through the motions until... Until what? Daniel interrupted sharply. Until she could figure out how to leave me. Until she could drain our bank accounts. What exactly did she tell you? Andrew glanced at Rebecca, who was shaking her head frantically, tears streaming down her face. She said you barely talked anymore. That you were like roommates. That the love was gone. The love was gone, Daniel repeated slowly. Interesting. Because I was under the impression we were happily married. I was under the impression that when she said I love you every morning, she meant it. Shows what I know. James cleared his throat. Sir, are you Andrew Mitchell? Age 34, residing at 2847, Oakmorn Drive. Andrew's eyes widened. How do you, what is this? I ran the security footage partial plates through the DMV, James said calmly. Your silver Lexus has been documented on this property 4 times in the past 6 months. You're also trespassing on private property. The situation seemed to crash down on Andrew all at once. Wait, you're arresting us? For being in an abandoned building. It's not abandoned, James corrected. It's private property with clearly posted warnings. And yes, given the repeated violations and the property owner's explicit instructions to prosecute, I have to issue citations at minimum. Rebecca sank to her knees on the concrete floor, sobbing openly now. Please, James. Please don't do this. Think about what this will do to my reputation, my job. I teach at the elementary school. If I have a criminal record. You should have thought about that before, Daniel said coldly. Actions have consequences, Rebecca. You made choices. Now you get to live with them. Andrew's demeanor shifted, anger replacing his initial shock. You know what? Fine. Arrest us. But you're a piece of work, man. Setting up a trap for your wife. Bringing a cop to catch her? What kind of person does that? Daniel's control finally snapped. He took a step forward, and James moved quickly between them. What kind of person does that? Daniel's voice shook with fury. I'm the kind of person who gets betrayed by the woman he loved, who gets lied to every single day, who gets made to feel crazy for noticing things were off. You want to know what kind of person I am? I'm the kind who refuses to be made a fool of. Daniel, James said quietly, a hand on his friend's chest. Step back. This isn't worth it. Daniel took a shuddering breath and stepped back, but his eyes never left Andrew's face. You deserve each other. Both of you, liars, cheats, willing to break the law for a few stolen hours. I hope it was worth it. Rebecca looked up from the floor, mascara running down her face, looking small and broken. Daniel, please. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But don't do this. Don't destroy my whole life over this. I'm not destroying your life, Daniel said quietly. You did that yourself. I'm just making sure there are consequences. That you don't just get to say I'm sorry and have everything go back to normal. James pulled out his citation book. I need both of your IDs. This is going on record. The property owners will be notified, and they'll decide whether to press formal charges. At minimum, you're both looking at fines and this incident on your records. As Andrew reluctantly pulled out his wallet and Rebecca fumbled for her purse with shaking hands, the reality of the situation seemed to fully settle over them. This wasn't just the end of an affair. This was a matter of public record, something that would follow them, affect Rebecca's teaching position, potentially impact Andrew's career as well. How did you even know? Rebecca asked suddenly, looking at Daniel with red-rimmed eyes. How did you figure out where we met? Daniel held up his phone, showing her the text message again. You told me yourself. You texted your husband instead of your lover and invited me to the usual spot. The rest was just paying attention to details, something I'm apparently much better at than you. The weight of her mistake seemed to crush Rebecca further. One moment of carelessness, one text sent to the wrong contact, and her carefully constructed double life had collapsed like a house of cards. James finished writing up the citations and handed them over. You'll need to appear in court on the date listed. The property owners will be contacted, and a representative will reach out regarding potential additional charges. He looked at both of them sternly. Consider yourselves lucky that this is just a citation for now. Trespassing in this county can carry jail time for repeat offenders. The drive to the police station to complete the formal documentation felt surreal. Daniel followed James's patrol car, watching Rebecca's Honda and Andrew's Lexus trailing behind like a funeral procession. The sun had fully set now, and the streetlights cast everything in harsh, artificial brightness that somehow made everything feel more real and more nightmarish at the same time. At the station, Daniel sat in the same conference room where he'd first asked James for help just hours ago. It felt like a lifetime had passed. Through the window, he could see Rebecca and Andrew being processed separately, their body language defeated, their faces etched with shock and shame. James came in and sat down across from him, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He slid one across the table to Daniel, who wrapped his hands around it without drinking. The paperwork's done, James said quietly. Citations issued. Riverside Development has been notified and they're moving forward with formal trespassing charges against both of them. Given the documented repeat offenses and the security footage they have, it's pretty open and shut. Daniel nodded numbly, staring at his reflection in the black coffee. The property manager mentioned something else, James continued, his tone careful. Their security cameras caught more than just vehicles. There's footage from inside the building too. If you wanted to proceed with a divorce and needed evidence of adultery, it's available. Of course there is, Daniel said hollowly. Of course they documented everything. Daniel. James waited until his friend met his eyes. Are you okay? I mean, I know you're not okay, but are you going to be okay? Daniel took a breath, considering the question seriously. Was he going to be okay? His marriage was over. The woman he'd trusted completely had betrayed him systematically for 6 months. She'd built a secret life in the ruins of an old warehouse, literally and figuratively. She'd looked him in the eye every day and lied. But sitting there in that sterile conference room, Daniel realized something unexpected. The crushing weight that had been sitting on his chest since he'd read that text message was starting to lift. Not because the pain was gone, it wasn't, and wouldn't be for a long time. But because he'd taken action. He'd refused to be a victim. He'd exposed the truth and ensured there were consequences. I will be, Daniel said finally. Not today. Maybe not for a long time. But yeah, eventually, I will be. James nodded, understanding in his eyes. For what it's worth, you handled this about as well as anyone could. A lot of people would have gone in swinging, would have made things worse. You kept your head. I wanted the truth, Daniel said simply. And I wanted her to face real consequences, not just apologize and expect everything to be fine. She made choices. She broke laws. She betrayed me. She doesn't get to just walk away from that. Through the window, he could see Rebecca sitting alone in a chair, staring at the citation in her hands. She looked small and broken, nothing like the confident woman he'd married. Part of him, a small, distant part, felt sorry for her. But mostly, he just felt tired. What happens now? Daniel asked. Now, they both go home, James explained. Court date is set for 3 weeks from now. If Riverside decides to pursue the criminal charges, which it sounds like they will, there could be fines, community service, possibly probation depending on how the judge feels about repeat offenders. And Rebecca's job? James grimaced. That's between her and the school district. But a criminal record for trespassing? It's not going to look good for an elementary school teacher. They do regular background checks. Daniel absorbed this information without emotion. This was all Rebecca's doing. She'd made these choices knowing she had responsibilities, knowing she had a career that required a clean record, knowing she had a husband who trusted her. None of this was his fault. There's one more thing, James said, hesitating. Andrew Mitchell? He's married too. Wife and 2 kids. I called her, as a courtesy, to let her know what was happening and where her husband was. She's on her way down here now. Daniel closed his eyes. More lives destroyed. More innocent people hurt by his wife's and Andrew's selfishness. Did you tell her about Rebecca? I told her there was an incident involving trespassing and that her husband was with another woman. She figured out the rest pretty quickly. James paused. She sounded devastated but not entirely surprised. I think she'd had suspicions. They sat in silence for a moment, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. Down the hall, phones rang and keyboards clacked, the normal sounds of a police station on a weeknight. But for Daniel, nothing felt normal and probably wouldn't for a long time. I should go, Daniel said finally, standing up. His legs felt weak, but he forced himself to remain steady. I don't think I can look at her right now. You don't have to, James assured him. Go home. Take care of yourself. If you need anything, and I mean anything, you call me. Day or night. Daniel managed a weak smile. Thanks, James. For everything. For believing me. For helping me get the truth. That's what friends are for. As Daniel walked toward the exit, he had to pass the waiting area. Rebecca looked up as he approached, her face a mask of tears and running makeup. She stood quickly, reaching out toward him. Daniel, please. Can we just talk?
Can we?
No, Daniel said firmly, not slowing his pace. We're done talking, Rebecca. You should call a lawyer. You're going to need one. For the criminal charges and for the divorce.
Divorce?
Her voice broke on the word. Daniel, you can't mean that. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can fix this. Daniel stopped and turned to face her fully. You had an affair for 6 months. You lied to me every single day. You set up a secret meeting place and broke the law repeatedly to be with another man. You literally texted me thinking I was him. What exactly about this is fixable? Rebecca sobbed, and despite everything, Daniel felt a pang of something, not quite sympathy, but the echo of what he used to feel for this woman. The ghost of love that hadn't quite died. I loved you, he said quietly. I loved you so much. I would have done anything for you. All you had to do was talk to me. Tell me you were unhappy. Tell me something was wrong. But you didn't. You chose this instead. You chose to destroy us instead of trying to fix us. I was scared, Rebecca whispered. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to hurt you. Well, congratulations, Daniel said bitterly. You hurt me anyway. You hurt me worse than honesty ever could have. Because now I don't just have to deal with you leaving. I have to deal with knowing that you lied to me, that you looked me in the eye and deceived me, that every I love you for the past 6 months was a performance. He turned away, unable to look at her anymore. My lawyer will contact you about the divorce proceedings. Don't try to call me. Don't come to the house. We'll communicate through attorneys from now on. Daniel, please. But he was already walking away, pushing through the station doors into the cool night air. His car was waiting where he'd left it, familiar and real in a world that had become unrecognizable. He climbed in and sat for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. His phone buzzed. A text from his lawyer. James must have already called him. Heard what happened.
Sorry, man.
We'll start paperwork tomorrow. You did the right thing. Did he? Daniel wasn't sure anymore. He'd wanted the truth, wanted justice, wanted Rebecca to face consequences for her actions. He'd gotten all of that. But sitting alone in his car, about to drive back to a house that would feel empty and wrong without her in it, he didn't feel victorious. He just felt hollow. Another text came through, this one from his sister. James called me. I'm coming over. Don't argue. You shouldn't be alone tonight. Daniel felt a rush of gratitude. His sister Sarah had always been protective, always been there for him. He texted back, thanks. I'll leave the door unlocked. As he drove home through streets that looked the same but felt different, Daniel thought about the future. There would be divorce proceedings. There would be court dates for the trespassing charges. There would be difficult conversations with friends and family, with his in-laws who would be devastated, with colleagues who would whisper and speculate. Rebecca would likely lose her teaching position. Her reputation in their small community would be destroyed. Andrew's wife would probably divorce him too, and his kids would grow up in a broken home. The ripples from this one night would spread far and wide, touching innocent people, changing lives forever. Part of Daniel felt guilty about that. But a larger part, the part that had been betrayed and lied to and made to feel crazy, felt that justice had been served. Actions had consequences. Choices mattered. You couldn't just betray people and break laws and expect to walk away unscathed. When he pulled into his driveway, Sarah's car was already there. She met him at the door, pulling him into a fierce hug without saying anything. Daniel let himself lean into it, let himself feel the support of someone who loved him unconditionally. Come on, she said gently. I brought wine and takeout. We'll figure this out. One day at a time. Inside, the house looked the same, but Daniel knew it would never feel the same again. Rebecca's things were everywhere, her book on the coffee table, her sweater draped over a chair, her coffee mug from this morning still in the sink. Evidence of a life that no longer existed, a marriage that had already ended even if the paperwork wasn't filed yet. Do you want to talk about it? Sarah asked, setting out food on the kitchen counter. Not yet, Daniel admitted. Right now, I just want to sit here with my sister and pretend the world is normal for a few hours." "I can do that," Sarah said softly. They ate in companionable silence, and gradually, Daniel felt some of the tension leave his body. He'd done what he needed to do. He'd faced the truth head-on. He'd refused to be a victim. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new pain, new difficulties to navigate. But tonight, he was surrounded by people who genuinely cared about him, and he was finally free from the lies. His phone buzzed one more time. Against his better judgment, he looked. It was from Rebecca. "I'm so sorry. For everything. You deserved better than this. You deserved better than me." For the first time that awful day, Daniel found himself agreeing with something his wife had said. He did deserve better. And now, painful as it was, he had the chance to find it. He deleted the message without responding and turned off his phone. The story was over. His old life was finished. But somewhere, in the ruins of what had been, Daniel could feel the faint stirrings of something new beginning to take shape. It would take time. It would take healing. It would take learning to trust again, to love again, to believe in happiness again. But as he sat there with his sister, in a house that would soon be his alone, Daniel Patterson made himself a promise. He would survive this. He would heal. And one day, maybe not soon, but one day, he would find someone who valued honesty as much as he did, someone who wouldn't throw away love for a few stolen hours in an abandoned warehouse. The usual spot, Rebecca had called it. A place of secrets and lies, of broken vows and criminal trespassing, of temporary pleasure that cost everything that mattered. Daniel had a new usual spot now, the truth. And no matter how painful it was, he would rather live in painful honesty than comfortable deception. That was the lesson of this terrible day. That was what he would carry forward into whatever came next. The truth might destroy you, but lies would destroy you worse. And Daniel Patterson had had enough of lies to last a lifetime.